That word karma has had a lot of currency in Western culture, and it has all sorts of things associated with it. But really, all it means is action. So a warm welcome to our Dharma night here in Brixton. Tonight, my name is Amra Pushpa, and tonight with my friend Maitrinita, who's here, we're going to be exploring the theme we started a couple of weeks ago, which is the essential teachings of the Buddha, known as the Noble Eightfold, the Four Noble Truths, and which are essentially the teachings of the Buddha quite shortly after he gained enlightenment. He was seeking liberation from suffering, liberation from the human predicament. And his teaching of the Four Noble Truths was in a medical formula. So suffering being the illness, the cause being craving, so we've explored those areas, the fact that there is a cure. And the last couple of weeks we've been exploring the prescription, the Buddha's prescription for the human predicament of suffering. And tonight we're going into another aspect of our daily, of life as we ordinarily live it. And it's known as, this next phase of the Eightfold Path is known as perfect action, and samyak karmnak, and that's a huge area. And again, Buddhism looks at the whole of our experience, and it's our action of body, speech, and mind. And in this area, we're getting into the whole area of morals and ethics, and you could say, well, that extends through all religions and societies too. We have moral codes, ethical codes, and there are different approaches to it. So, one example could be you might feel like you want to steal something, but because you could get into trouble, that there's an external law, you don't do it. But then if you're practicing as a Buddhist, you might still have the urge to steal something, but because you're practicing, you refrain and you start reflecting. You might still have that urge, so in your mind, there's some kind of ethical conflict, but you're reflecting on, I guess, the ethical consequences. And then the third level is you're transformed to the extent that you no longer want to steal. You've become much more in line with what Buddhists would call like a natural morality. So the first example of maybe breaking a law, there are in society and religions ethical codes. So something from the outside that is like kind of a rule. And it could kind of be across the board. But with Buddhism, there's more of an internal reflection. We have guidelines. We like training principles along, in terms of principles along which we want to live our lives. And they kind of throw us back on ourselves to look at, understand our own psychology. So what's our motive? And that's key in terms of Buddhist ethics. And we wouldn't talk about right or wrong, ethical, unethical. We're looking at the word skillful. So how do we act skillfully with our minds, with our speech, and with our bodily actions? And that word skillful is quite, I've always found that quite fascinating, because it brings in, it kind of falls into this whole idea that we have ethical training principles, and how do we become more skilled with that? How do we use our intellect to understand the consequences, what the Buddha taught about that? And it's so it's really knowing ourselves at the deepest level, and it ties in with what's known in Buddhism as the 3 levels of wisdom. So we can know with our minds, we understand that we want to behave in a certain way. I think a couple of weeks ago, my Trinita talked about wanting to be vegan for ethical reasons. But you just can't decide that. You need to get all your energies behind it. So then we might go to the next level of wisdom. We start reflecting on it. So we start, and reflections that kind of in between thinking and meditating. And we might do that with friends who are also trying to live life more skillfully. And then the 3rd level is we meditate on that. So that's more of the approach of Buddhism towards living, bringing our actions in line with the vision. So each of these limbs goes back to what the vision is of the Buddha's enlightenment. So how do we act in line with that vision? That vision is always there. And the word for action in Buddhism is karma. And that word karma has had a lot of currency in Western culture, and it has all sorts of things associated with it. But really, all it means is action. And the fact that our actions have consequences. And the way we are today, the way we are in this moment, has a lot to do with, it's a result of how we've acted in the past. So maybe tendencies that sort of come up right now, they're influenced by our actions of the past, and we can influence how we are in the future by reflecting on our actions right now. And I think what's very beautiful about Buddhism's approach to ethics is it's very much connected to what the Buddha's search for what makes us happy, what frees us from suffering. And the first 2 verses of the Dhammapada, one of the most ancient teachings of the Buddha, talks about how our experiences are preceded by the state of our mind, so whether our intentions are skillful or not. And if they are skillful or pure, then he says happiness follows, like the wheel of the cart following the hoof of the ox. It just makes us happier, and that's been my experience. Whereas when we act with unskillfulness, when we haven't trained and tuned in our skills, it's not like that we're bad. It doesn't mean that we're evil or bad. What it means is that we're just creating our own, reinforcing our unhappiness. And it just, and that's what the Buddha's seeking of enlightenment was trying to free us from, to free us from that kind of suffering. So it's to me, it's a very beautiful connection, acting more skillfully. It's not only benefits ourselves and understanding our psychology, we become happier, and then we benefit others. And this has an effect on our meditation, and this helps us develop insight as well. So there are many different levels to it. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to my friend Trinita, who's sitting here.
Hello.
Hello. I just realized I wanted just to mention, I guess at root of the Buddhist training principles is the principle of nonharm. And that runs through, refraining from taking life, to doing harm through sexual energy, doing harm through telling untruths with the speech, and doing harm through taking what's not been given. So just a very quick run through. But, my Trinita, I was, I mentioned that example of the, what you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, about, you know, having this intention to move towards
the lust for chocolate.
vegan. So you had the intention,
Yeah,
and is that partly because of a precept of non-harming? Was that part of what was motivating you?
What, to go vegan?
Yeah, to go vegan. Did that have to do with non-harm?
Yes, it did, because it felt like a more subtler, you know, wanting to move more deeply into a commitment to non-harm, and I thought being vegan would that would be another deeper commitment to non-harm that I could do in the, you know, which was practical for me to do. I have the conditions and the choice to be vegan. So
I imagine that would have come out of years of reflecting on the precepts, perhaps, or.
Well, yes. What, you know, what is loving kindness?
Yes, that's right. So going more deeply.
Yes.
It's kind of like what I was saying is that, you know, with each of these 8 limbs, we just keep going around and around them and reflecting and meditating, and that's how I became vegetarian originally. It was just hearing that precept of non-harm, and it's taken me years to become a vegan, and I think I've known over the years of practicing the precepts. I can't force it. And I think I couldn't force myself to become vegan because I understood it was, for me, you know, I really understood the principle in my mind. But there was just so many layers. Yeah. But then I finally, after maybe a good number of years of reflecting on it, maybe and then finally my heart was completely behind it. And one thing I was amazed about was how happy when I was finally ready. You know, like I didn't force myself because I knew my psychology. But when I was finally ready, I came back to that Buddhist teaching about how happiness will, you know, come in when we're ready to put our energies behind, you know, a principle of non-harm, which underlies those ethical precepts. But at the same time, because I know how, you know, people, we just have to go through a process of reflecting on you know, these guidelines, these ethical principles.
It also felt like, you know, it came down to partly like taking the not given as well. That the which comes out of non-harm. Taking the not given, generosity, isn't it?
That's right.
Because I started to think about the animals that were being deprived of milk, you know, the calves or that kind of thing, and it being diverted. So it started to, not be so much about the inconvenience as well, or that came along as well, but that was in the mix, but also the effect on another living being by my choices. And it feels like it is more doable, probably, or more obvious with maybe because I can have a choice to eat meat or not eat meat, or to become vegan or not. Whereas it's harder to see how you work with non-harm if it's in another country, or people are suffering in another country, and I'm not always clear how I can change that. Change that.
I mean, I see it as a matter of education,
right?
And our deepening or wanting to know.
Yes.
You know, I think at a certain point I haven't wanted to know so much about animals. I haven't wanted to know much. You know, maybe there's so much we can. You know, maybe our energies are going in many different directions. But then, you know, I guess see practicing precepts as a continual process of educating myself, and maybe stretching, wanting to know, you know, where is this clothing made? You know, has there been so slave labor involved, and it, we have had Buddhist Action Month where we look at, all sorts of things like climate, but also exploitation, and it's a constant education. There's just no limit to it really until we're enlightened. We can't know everything, but I love the process of becoming more sensitized and more interested. Yeah. And we had someone who in the Sangha in Croydon who worked with people in Bolivia in the copper mines. So she was raising our awareness to the effects of having, where did we get our metals from? What are we using in our computers? What are we even putting in Buddhist rupas, which never would have occurred to me. So but I think when we're in a community where we're helping each other explore this, then, it kind of widens our horizons, I think.
Yeah, I do think friendships, the friendships have helped me to start to, like you say, widen the view, widen the perspective and the view on my ethical behaviour. They kind of sort of reflect back when I'm not by judgment, but just by talking about it. Sometimes I can see where I have, talk about being skillful and not being so skillful as well. I can see it through just being able to express that sometimes. And sometimes just that sense of being able to have a dialogue and see another view around the ethics of behaviour, or my ignorance, and unwillful ignorance as well.
Is it willful or is it just unconscious? I just think I'm feeling so, taking in more of the effects of some of the things like plastic, or some plastic. I just never would give it a second thought because I just was kind of absorbing in society, and now I know I just can't let myself off the hook. It's more inconvenient and stuff, but it's just it's something that I just find the world needs, is people reflecting on what harm we're doing to the world, to each other, and what's interesting in Buddhist ethics too is this whole area of confession, because I'm a lapsed Catholic and I used to go to Catholic confession, and it's quite a different thing in Buddhism, because it's about freeing ourselves of the burden. It's like acknowledging, getting out in the open. Yes, I did something unskillful, but it's more to sort of just put it in, bring some light to it. And just having, with friends that we trust to hear it, and then you just let it go. It's sort of to free ourselves, to kind of energize us to move forward. So,
do you think ethics can be beautiful?
Very much so. Very much so. And I do think, I guess Buddhism would teach it's a moral universe, that there is a universal energy that is universally moral, that we're, that we can put ourselves more and more in line with. I found that in different, like where does our conscience come from? Why, I think most people recognize that they, regardless of whether they're Buddhist or not, sometimes they're weighed down by a conscience of doing something that might have caused harm. And Buddhism distinguishes between guilt and remorse. Guilt is not helpful. It's more doing ourselves harm, to feel guilty, like there's some kind of judgment in guilt, but it's very healthy to just to acknowledge and to feel some remorse that, I've done some harm, and to aspire to do better. And sometimes we just have such ingrained habits, it's not going to be easy. But to bring it out into the open, we can support each other to move ahead, move forward from these unhelpful habits.
Do you think that it sounds as though you're talking about a freedom when you can, that can come from confession then?
Yeah, very liberating.
But how is that different from the Catholic? Well, did you feel freedom when you confessed?
Well, I think I was more going through the motions and maybe didn't understand it, and it depended on someone more in a religious authority, pardoning me and giving me, and I'm sure it has its beneficial uses. It just wasn't very beneficial for me. I find it more helpful personally to have this way of more of a personal ownership of my intentions, and then through friendship and just acknowledging it with friends, it's more personally helpful for me. It's not to disrespect other religions' approaches to it, but we're exploring how the Buddha, even the Buddha's time, they would have these rainy season retreats, where they would all meditate together with the monks, and at the end, people would just apologize to each other and confess, if I've caused you any harm, and that's how it started, more out of friendship and community. So I find that approach helpful for me,
Sometimes we don't want to take responsibility.
Of course not.
I like this external.
Well, yes,
sometimes you want this external person to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't want to see that we're doing harm.
No.
Yeah. It's true. And like with veganism, I used to think, oh gosh, it's so inconvenient, and how can that person eat pizza without cheese on it? I mean, I'm half Italian, so I just couldn't imagine. And and it took me
vegan cheese. Oh,
well, yeah, I know, but that's like sacrilege to an Italian. And then I went on this 3-month retreat. And at the beginning of the retreat, they would offer both. It's the second time I'd done this 3-month retreat, and somebody said, and I didn't want to hear it. Well, they killed the male chicks for those eggs, and it was like the 100th blow. I thought, if I'm ever going to be vegan, why not do it on this retreat where I'm getting great vegan food? And it worked. Yeah. And then I thought, after the retreat, I come back to London, I'm surely going to lapse. But to my amazement, it wasn't that inconvenient. And then I, after a couple of months back, I thought, oh gosh, I can do it. And that's when I started feeling incredibly light and happy in myself. And I just brought me back to the Buddhist teaching, is that, when we're doing, it just leads to happiness. Not that in the Buddha's day they were necessarily vegan, particularly. Like the Buddha would take whatever was put in his bowl. But he did speak a lot about not harming animals. He did talk about that. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We'd just like to invite you, if you feel like you've benefited from this class or other classes or other activities we have here, or perhaps know other people who could benefit from it, to consider making a donation. We mostly are doing this on a volunteer basis. We have to pay rent for premises. We have technology to get up and running, and we couldn't do this without people's support. We know these are particularly stretched times for people, but if you could make a donation and help us strengthen and build a community here in Brixton, we'd be very grateful. There's a donation link on the website, And so please go to that if you can help us out financially. Thank you very much.